Dr. Sandberg, the modern techniques of enhancement, do you think that they are on the verge to change the basic characteristics of what is Homo sapiens sapiens?
I think they're on their way of doing that, but it's still going to be a while because the technologies we have currently available, like pharmacological enhancement of cognition, various forms of software and some primitive neural implants, are still not very profound. They might just affect what we could call surface characteristics, our ability to remember things, our level of alertness, small things, which are quite important and might actually have big social impact. But we're not that close to the kind of core issues of what it means to be human. I think important core characteristics of humans are our motivational system. For example, the thing that we tend to be risk averse. We tend to regard risks as more serious than benefits, even when from a rational probability theory and a standpoint, they might be the same. A small change in that might make us more economically rational, but also would make us behave very much strangely. For example, we would never try to go for a lottery. We would find that completely ridiculous because it's obviously a loss. Similarly, I think other core characteristics of human might rely on our cognitive biases, some of the irrationalities we have, which again, we might actually want to change. And finally, of course, we have our biological nature, which I think in the long run, we're actually going to radically transform, both by integrating technology into our bodies, but also by perhaps copying parts of our neural machinery into computers.
Yes. Don't we already know a lot about what is making us happy and what is not making us happy? And don't we know a lot about the way the brain is functioning? And are we not already trying to intervene in that?
We have for a long time trying to make ourselves happy. After all, that's one of the original goals of philosophy, to find the happy life. The frightening realization we got, thanks to modern cognitive neuroscience, is that even when we know what makes us happy, which is surprisingly rarely, we are very, very bad at actually doing the actions that makes us happy. So we have various irrationalities that make us actually pursue goals that are less than optimal. We tend to, for example, overvalue things that cost a lot of money. Although intellectually we know that's not going to make me happy, we still fall for that. A lot of these irrationalities actually impair our ability to live a really good life. And we might need some biomedical interventions to fix that. But again, many people might not pursue them because we do not perceive the real need.
You say that at this moment of the development of new technologies, we are only dealing with the surface. But in the future, we would be able to go deeper into this changing of what is Homo sapiens sapiens. Is it limitations of technology or limitations of our own self-imposed will that keeps us back from doing this?
I think it's a combination of limitations of technology, limitations of our knowledge, and limitations of will. Our technology is still rather crude, but they're advancing at a very rapid pace. But we also have realized more and more that dealing with complex biological systems also gives rise to a lot of surprises, some very bad and some surprisingly good. And then we have the interesting thing that we have a multitude of perspectives. It's not just that society as a whole is advancing. Sometimes individual groups try out things. One interesting example is the body modification subculture. I have a friend who's got an implanted magnet. He can sense magnetic fields. He didn't go to a doctor to get this because, of course, doctors don't do that. It's not even an enhancement. It's an extension in an entirely new direction. So instead, he gets to the same fellow that have implanted the various weird piercings and studs my friend got. So they together did this addition to his body and actually to his nervous system. Because he's sensing using this magnet, he can sense magnetic fields to some degree, because the magnet moves inside his finger, and now we got a new sense.
Yes.
What's the benefit of that, you might ask? Well, it turns out that there are some practical uses. You can find out whether there is electric current in a cable, you can detect the electric motor, and you can do various party tricks. Yes. But he, of course, did it to explore things. He wanted to explore something. And he belongs to a small minority of people willing to take quite serious medical risks in order to explore.
He did it for curiosity?
Yes. And the rest of us might sit back and very much benefit from these explorations. And if it turns out that they discover something useful, like that there are certain magnetic fields that are very beautiful, or that life becomes better by being able to sense it, then it might become more common. But we need that kind of exploration. Right now, I think our society is trapped in a bit too much risk-averse thinking. Nobody should ever be hurt by any intervention whatsoever, which is, of course, completely impossible, but it impairs quite a lot of our research.
One of the arguments of the risk-avoiding tendency is that evolution has had millions of years to develop a very complex mechanism of checks and balances in the human body as well as outside the human body, and this represents in a way a kind of nature's wisdom that is not possible for scientists in a few generations to outfox, so to speak.
Well, I think scientists have been doing a pretty good job of outfoxing the wisdom of nature in many domains. For example, look at contraceptives and various forms of anesthesia. But it's true, evolution has a form of accumulated knowledge inside our genome. And one should be careful about modifying that without understanding what evolution can and cannot do. Because evolution has on one hand provided us with various very good adaptations, and some of these ones we don't understand at all, like sleep. We don't have a good theory exactly why we sleep, but it seems to be very important actually. It's highly preserved across many species despite big cost. On the other hand, we also know that there are certain adaptations that are no longer adequate because they relate to an environment we have left. In our ancestral environment, food was very scarce. So a lot of our organs and developmental programs are based on the assumption that food is scarce and energy need to be husbanded. Today it's the reverse. We should probably be better off if we could waste a bit of extra energy so we wouldn't get as fat. Similarly, evolution is slow. And certain changes, for example, agriculture, are still leading to genes that are spreading throughout the human population. They have been doing that for a few thousand years, but we still haven't stopped because we're just getting started. In the long run, we would need tens of thousands of years spreading.
But could we assume that we are completely understanding all the things that we are changing by the enhancement techniques in relation to what evolution has produced?
I don't think we can expect to understand everything, and in believing that you do understand everything about a system is bound to be wrong.
Yes.
If there is one cognitive bias that is indicative of humanness, is probably overconfidence.
Yes.
But even knowing that, and knowing that the only thing that we learn from history, that we don't learn very much from history, it's pretty clear that we can do useful exploration. We have to be cautious, and especially we have to learn from whatever we discover when we do the experiments. So my suggestion is that, well, we should be doing experimentation. Start out in a small scale and, of course, based on whatever we know about the system. And then we should learn from whatever happens, both whether the experiment goes well or badly. We should incorporate that in our knowledge. That's how evolution has, to some degree, done it. But evolution is not guided by the human concerns for fellow humans. It just occurs. It doesn't care how many children dies as long as the genes get updated. Exactly. We do care about the children. Yes. So that's why I think we can actually do a better job than evolution, a more humane job.
Okay. Earlier today, I heard you give a lecture, and this you said at a certain point that we humans today are suffering from a certain Cartesian hangover. What do you mean by that?
It's the idea that reason and emotion are completely separate things, that we can neatly divide the contents of our mind into logical reasoning and then those emotions that maybe motivate us but have no place in logic. In practice, this is wrong. We know from modern cognitive psychology and neuroscience that actually, if emotional systems of the brain don't work, our decision-making is impaired. We make the wrong judgments. And similarly, our emotions are quite dependent on our logical thinking. But of course, this is still part of our culture, this idea that we're a dichotomy between it, and we need to overcome that.
But isn't it so that much of the science and technology that are now offering enhancement techniques are deriving from Cartesian thought?
I don't think so. A lot of it are simply the result of whatever we found in science. But I think we have this interesting problem that it often gets framed as Cartesian. A cognitive enhancer is supposed to just improve your logical thinking, not your emotions. But that's of course wrong, because most of the cognitive enhancers are also a bit of stimulants. They give you a bit more extra energy, and they probably influence your mood.
But it's also a characteristic of Cartesian thought that the rational reasoning that is producing this knowledge is outside of nature and not part of nature itself. And this, to your point of view, should be overcome, shouldn't it?
Well, I think reasoning has a pretty obvious biological basis. If it didn't have that, we couldn't do any enhancement of it. So I think to a large degree, cognitive enhancement kind of disproves the Cartesian view.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.